Hi, everybody. Welcome again to another episode of the ShopNotes Podcast. I'm your host, Phil Huber, joined by the usual cast of suspects, Logan and John. On today's episode, number 138, we're going to discuss new books, a shop update, and the Christmas Project decision tree, among other topics. This episode of the ShopNotes Podcast is presented by Epilogue Laser. Quickly and easily customize your woodworking projects for added beauty and value. Learn more at epiloguelaser.com.
Can I just say, before we start, how much I sometimes underappreciate heat? Like, Phil went into the studio yesterday, and we forgot to turn the heat on after filming, and it was cold.
It was 58.
I'm sitting in my house right now, and there's actually a little buck outside. I can see him. He's looking at my guys building the building. And it's cold out, and I'm sitting here absolutely freezing. So I had to make a cup of coffee before we went. And this week, I spent a couple of nights out in the new shop installing my radiant heat, and it's going to be so nice. I'm going to have that SOB cranked up to like 95. It's going to be awesome. So excited.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it is easy to underestimate heat. And having an unheated garage workshop, I realize that every time it gets to be around this time of year. Because it seems like we always get or recently anyway, we get a November cold snap where we're cruising along and it's like air conditioning weather. And then 2 days later, it's 19 degrees outside.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the hard part is that in the springtime, it takes my garage forever to warm up. Forever.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Like the slab just stays super cold, and even if it's really nice outside, I have to have the windows open and the garage door open for me to feel any kind of warm weather or warm air. But you would think that the converse would happen then in fall, that I would have this reservoir of warmish temperature. Nope. It gets cold. It is cold in my shop.
Yeah. I was say I've noticed that in my garage too. Like, we get that cold snap, right? And it gets pretty. Oh, there goes the buck. He's chasing a doe. I don't know if you guys can see him. Sorry.
Cue the Barry White music there a little bit. Love is in the air.
I was wondering what he was doing, and he just popped his head out of the trees right here. And I'm like, what is he doing? And then here comes a doe running through, and that little dude is chasing her hard. Anyways, I noticed that, like, we get that cold snap like you're talking about, where it's like, it's been, in the 50s, 60s, it drops down to like the 20s for a couple of days. And You're right, like, all of a sudden, I'll walk in my garage, and it's nice outside, and it's freezing in there. It's just like a cool little cave, and you open up the garage doors and all the windows to at least get some of that warm air to come in the inside. I'm hoping that's what happens with this shop, because, man, I laid so much. Well, my concrete guys laid a bunch of foam down, and I put all of these, all this PEX down. My son and I stapled it, which a 8-year-old is not very much help stapling PEX, in case you guys are wondering. If you're looking for a 8-year-old,
gonna write that down.
Yeah. If you're in the market for labor, 8-year-old is not where you want to get it. But I'm hoping once that thing heats up, and I've read this and I've heard this about radiant heat, is once it gets up there, it will stay there. So I know my buddy Nelson that listens to the podcast, he's in the HVAC industry, and he was like, yeah, a DIY radiant floor kit, whatever. I'm hoping it works. I don't know. We'll see. Maybe I'll be a fool.
Like, what could go wrong?
Right.
Yeah, I know, right?
You got this.
Yeah.
So yeah, I also think that I'm getting older now, and my ability to tolerate being out in my cold workshop is harder sometimes.
Yeah.
So apparently I'm turning a little bit more into a pansy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's something too about standing on cold concrete that it just absorbs into your bones and just.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I'll tell you what though, these guys that are building my shop, they're actually wrapping it up right now. Like they're putting the finishing pieces on. It's an Amish crew, okay? And I think I said that. And they wear, a lot of the Amish community will wear homemade clothes. I don't know what they make their clothes out of, but oh my lord, those boys look like they have nothing on. And they're out there, it's like 17 degrees, 45-mile-an-hour winds, and they're just pounding away, like stripping off their jackets and stuff, their work coats, because they must be like hot and stuff. But it's like, man, you guys are bigger men than I am, because it's cold.
Yeah.
I will say I was a little spoiled, too, in the fact that over Thanksgiving I spent the week with my sister, who has a wood-burning fireplace in her house. And it was a delight, let me just say, to be able to spend some time by a fireplace. And and there's a difference, a qualitative difference between a real wood-fired fireplace and a gas Fisher-Price fireplace.
Yeah. There's nothing, I think, if anybody burns wood for heat, they know what I mean. Like there's a difference between wood heat and gas heat. Like the wood heat is dry, it's hot, you know. When you flip on like a gas fireplace or even a gas furnace, it's different.
Yeah. So it renewed my probably never to be fulfilled longing to have some kind of a wood burning stove in my garage for my workshop. Because I can just imagine my cars starting on fire in the middle of the night for whatever reason. And then the investigation and...
I kind of have a feeling your wife wouldn't like it either.
Yeah, probably.
Like, yeah, I don't know.
I will say there's a one-car garage in my sister's neighborhood. Her house is... in one of the older neighborhoods in my hometown, and so it's over 100 years old, and the house on the corner still has, like, I don't know if I'd call it the original one-car garage, but it's just a one-car garage with like bifold doors for the door opening and a little L section off the side, and it's a small building, and I just love the shape of it, and I think it would make an awesome workshop. And in that workshop, I would have a wood-burning stove.
That's right.
I'd make a place for it.
You know, I mean, in a couple of years, both your kids will be gone. There's a big trampoline area in your backyard.
Yeah, I've thought of that. Because I have there's a garden, your kind of standard suburban house garden shed back there that could get burned to the ground and then turned into a fun workshop. The only problem would be getting power out there.
Yeah. I got wire for you. Yeah, like 75 feet left. That's expensive, too. Yeah. I was actually going to try to sell it. It's like I bought this big roll of 250 KC mil wire. The roll weighed like 800 pounds. And I'm like, there's like 75 feet left. That's like $1,000. Like I should probably try to sell that. So
you have exterior going on the just finishing up on your shop right now.
Yep.
And you've got like half of a limestone quarry that's been dumped on the floor.
Yep. Recycled concrete. Oh, we're eco-friendly here.
Right. Mm. I believe they call that urbanite.
Okay. Yeah, probably.
You can look that up.
Mine know the big urban centers in the U.S.
Right. Yeah. Urban concrete quarries. So then you'll get concrete in pretty soon, and then you start the insulation process then, huh? Or
I gotta actually fur out the inside first, because right now when you go into the building, it's just posts every 8 feet.
oh yeah.
So I need to run some form of furring to bring that flush and give me somewhere to put insulation. I have all the insulation. It's in my garage. I have three full pallets of insulation sitting where my wife's car usually goes. And the insulation was too tall the pallets were too tall to go in the garage door, so I had to go like climb up and knock the top layer off so I could get it in the garage door.
So what kind of insulation is it? Like panelized or
no? I did roll bat for the walls. I did roll bat, and I did it's R19, maybe it's R20. It might be R23. I think it's R23 with 6 inch because it's 6 inch. And then I have 68 bags of blow-in insulation for the ceiling. So, yeah. So I got a little work. Colin, our Popwood digital editor, asked me the other day, "Hey, when's the move-in date?" I'm like, I don't know. Yeah, I told him like April. I'm hoping. So I really am probably gonna first try to get the radiant floor turned on, even though there won't be any insulation in it, and I'll just be throwing money away. But get that at least turned on, so it will have some form of heat coming off the slab as I'm in there working. And I don't know. Yeah. Yep.
So for the furring, are you using a synthetic furring or a natural animal furring?
It's natural animal fur.
Wow.
You know me. Many small critters had to sacrifice for this.
It's a lot of squirrel furring.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Takes a lot, but
Yeah.
should add a little insulation though. A little R value there.
Yeah. A little bit of water resistance as well.
There's a certain tanning process that's involved in order for it to be structural furring.
Yeah, you want to make sure it's dried out
Yeah.
too, or you're going to get a smell.
So John, what's going on with you?
Oh, I don't know. I'm trying to just like ease into the end of the year here. I don't want to just end the year cold turkey, so I'm just kind of ramping down.
Yeah.
But
The slide.
yeah. So trying to avoid getting into any like last minute Christmas present builds, like I usually get myself into. So
Right, which is something that I wanted to talk about because simply for this fact in that you guys are well aware of the fact that I start Christmas projects pretty early and still end up racing until whatever holiday deadline that I have. And John has a tendency to make that decision far later in the calendar.
I like that smell of wet lacquer combined with, fir trees and the pine.
Yep.
Smell of Christmas.
I wonder if with our spray gun in the booth, if we could put in like a few drops of like balsam essential oil.
Ooh, yeah.
With the lacquer,
Yeah.
especially in the November, December timeframe, just to see if that would.
I think Mark would appreciate that experiment.
Yeah. I mean, he was flabbergasted that one of the staff members here, who shall remain nameless, talked to him about the possibility of cutting steel on the table saws.
The saw stop. Table saw.
Yeah.
I mean, the saw stops do have that toggle, like you have to turn the two keys at the same time.
Yep.
Yeah. I think
in his defense, it was fairly thin steel, but it was still steel.
right.
Yeah.
And it was just a scoring cut is all he wanted to do.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, he never cut all the way through it.
Maybe you put like one of those fiber metal cutting blades from a circular saw on the table saw, and then you can do it.
Yeah, those things are definitely rated for 10,000 RPM.
Yeah. I think circular saws actually spin faster than a table saw.
I think they do. They do.
All good decisions.
Right.
And then Logan has a tendency on your Christmas projects to do them in batches. Large batches.
I had told myself that I was going to do bowls for everybody this year. Actually, what I wanted to do is I wanted to do, like, not huge bowls, but, like, I don't know, like salad-sized bowls, kind of, this size, something like that.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So kind of like your standard salad bowl. But then there's a turner, really well-known turner. His name is Richard Raffin. He's from England, lives in Australia now. He was a production turner, so he does a lot of stuff like really quickly, and like you're like, that doesn't look very safe, but I get what he's doing because he's trying to do it very quickly because he's a production turner. But he turns like spatulas, like they're not very wide, they're only about 3 inches wide maybe, and they taper down with a round handle. But he turns them. They start off basically as a plank of wood. You put them on the lathe, you turn them into the spatula, you sand them on a drum sander on the lathe. So he could batch out, 30 or 40 of them in a day. So I might be able to get 3 done in a day. And I was like, oh, that would make a nice little Christmas present, like a salad set,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I got too much crap going on right now. Like, this is a sign. You talk about a sign of getting older when you're just a weenie now about getting out in the cold and stuff. No. My sign of getting older is I start making logical decisions. Like, hey,
right.
I know I shouldn't do this, so I'm just not going to.
You start to know better,
Yeah.
Yes.
Well,
Next
and then
year.
act on it. I mean, because you might know better, but then still end up doing it.
Right.
Next year. So.
Yeah. So when you go about, like, for example, either the salad bowl idea or the cutting board Christmas from a few years ago, how did you go through that process where you're like, this is what I'm doing?
Got a wild hair at my what, and was like, you know what, it would be fun. We'd be making 35 cutting boards, but we're not going to make, like, flat face kind of. We're gonna do end grain ones, and some of them will be crazy mosaic ones. Some of them will be really nice walnut ones. Whatever. It's one of those. It's like, okay, I ordered all the material. Once the material's there, I read this from Chris Schwartz, and it was one of those blog posts recently, like probably in the last day or two. Was that the hardest part of a project is the first cut. Because then you're committed.
Right.
And once you make that first cut, then it's like, I'm not going to stop till it's done.
Right.
I have a half-finished office in the basement. That's kind of...
Yeah.
But...
We'll put an asterisk by that statement.
Yeah.
Not going to stop till it's done.
That's right. That, I guess that's the thing. It's just like, once I had all the lumber for those ordered and it's there in the shop, it's like, well, now I feel like I have to get out. So they just start cutting it. And then it's just like, okay, here's my process. I'm going to cut with something like the cutting boards. You're limited with the number of clamps you have. So it's not like you can glue up every cutting. If you're doing 35 cutting boards, you can't glue them all up at the same time. But what you can do is you can cut enough to get 5 glued up, and then you can start getting the next parts to the next stage. So then you have a line. So then it's like, okay, these 5 boards, you break that 35 batch down into 5s or 10s. So it's like, okay, I can do these, 5 or 7 at a time. So I will clamp them all up, slice them apart, reclamp them, and then those 5 will be at the, router sled flattening stage by the time the next 5 are in clamps.
Sure.
So while those are in clamps, I can do those 5. And when those 5 are done, I can take these out and do those and glue up the next one. So it's just kind of a, in a perfect world, you'd have enough to do everything. Doing something like the bowls, same thing. It would be, I'm limited to one at a time, but it's like, okay, you start by rough turning the outside of each bowl.
Sure.
And it depends on how you're doing it. With the bowls, I would probably wet turn them. So it would be one of those like, hey, the blank's going on and it's just going to be a hard hogging, get it all down to the right thickness, sand it. Probably on those, when you wet turn a bowl, it likes to move. So either you sand it on the lathe immediately, but there's a lot of water in it, so it gums up your sandpaper, or you set it off to the side, let it dry a bit, then you can hand sand it, and that's probably what I do, is hand sand them. So it's just, I don't know, it's just working through the process, man. You learn, and this is where it's interesting to me, because I know of a lot of production turners, and you get these little tricks. And I always thought it was silly where I'd be listening to somebody like, Mike Mahoney, where he's like, or Richard Raffin, where it's like, hey, I could pick up my gouge, my bowl gouge and do this, but I have a spindle gouge in my hand already. I'm going to figure out how to do it with this so I don't have to put it down and pick up another tool.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, that seems really finite to be worried about that. Like, does it really matter if you flip one tool for the next? But when you're talking about 100 bowls or whatever you're doing, it does. So you figure out all these little shortcuts. It's like, okay, how can I make this the most efficient way as possible? So I don't know. I don't like doing it. Let's just be clear. I don't like doing this. It's not my favorite thing.
Yeah.
And yet we've done it, so clearly there's something in us that does like to do it.
Yeah. I don't know that I've ever seen you, Phil, do a batch of stuff.
I did the spoon sets a few years ago.
Oh, you did.
The carved
spoons. Yeah, I have one in my coffee cabinet. Yeah.
Yep, I got one too.
Yep.
So that that's about that I did, because that went for both sides of the family, plus extras for gifts around here. Because I did like a cooking spoon, kind of a spatula sort of thing, salad spoons, spoon and fork, and then I did this series of small, like tablespoon, coffee scoop kind of things. And that was probably the first time that I've done like a giant batch like that. And you're right, you do learn a lot of stuff, both about like efficient tool use and also, when you're repeating the same motion over and over, you begin to get an idea of like, oh, I can take a huge amount of material off and not worry about hosing this whole thing up. If I do this, then that's going to save me time on the next set of spoons or whatever. So, but yeah, I will say that most of the time I do projects for gifts. They're usually one-offs, and the trouble there is that it just, each thing is its own. So you can't really build any efficiency into stuff. So you're just constantly doing one, which is probably why I try and start sooner, is because I know that each one of those projects is going to be like its own thing. It's just its own building. Want to give a shout out to today's podcast sponsor, Epilogue Laser. You can quickly and easily customize your woodworking projects for added beauty and value. Learn more at epiloguelaser.com. So, now, John, you've been known to make large installation-based Christmas presents.
Yes.
How do those ideas form for you?
I usually do not think about it at all until like Thanksgiving week or weekend, when we're off and I have time to like think about stuff, and we're thinking about Christmas presents and ideas, and I get some wild idea that's totally unnecessary, but those are the most fun, are the things that are unnecessary. Like I think I've done like a treehouse loft, or monkey bars in our basement with a laminate slide and all this stuff. And usually that comes about Thanksgiving weekend, and it's like, yep, I can get this done. I have 4 weeks to do this, which is kind of a misguided thought, because you can't spray something with lacquer on the last day and then put it in your house, because our lacquer seems to like off gas for like 2 weeks at least, and it'll sneak up on you too. You might, it's pretty good, and then you put it in a small area and it's sleepy time. So it's like you really only have 2 weeks from Thanksgiving to get this, sprayed, finished, because then you let it, sit for a while and kind of off gas and dry and solidify and all that stuff. So usually it's like, okay, I have this idea, I'm just randomly sketching things up and taking measurements and working late nights and coming into the shop on the weekends to get this done so I can get it, sprayed and kind of wrapped up. And usually it's a pretty, wild couple weeks. So
right. Which, I mean, between Thanksgiving and Christmas, it's not like anything else is going on.
Right, exactly. So,
yeah.
There's nothing else to do. So
maybe you just need to start celebrating Canadian Thanksgiving in October.
There you go.
And then you have some more time.
Yep. It's a plan. We just got to move to Canada.
Yeah.
So
I will say that there is a certain, I mean, I build the projects because they're fun for me, and I just can't stop myself from making things. But I will say that there is a certain delight in being able to see people open up the stuff that you made, or to see it and have that kind of like over the top experience that, I was able to do this for somebody and
they can't believe you actually made it.
Right.
Or the best one is where it's like, oh my God, this looks like I would have bought it at Target.
Yeah.
Aw.
You're like, oh, because I have way more than $39.99 into that.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, back to Logan's comment that the first cut is the hardest. I find the opposite. It's the last cut for me, because like I'll get stuff to like functional, and then it's adding all the little like trim pieces.
Oh, yeah.
Like we redid our kitchen, would have been like 2008, and I think it went to 2021 before we added the last, or I added the last like little pieces of base shoe and all the little trim pieces, because it's like it gets to functional and then it's great. It's the last little details that are always the hardest for me.
No, and I have that same problem because we did a basement remodel and I put in a bathroom and spare room downstairs, not a bedroom, extra room downstairs. And I got drywall in it. It needs drywall on the ceiling yet, and some insulation between that and the bedroom that's above it. And that's kind of where we are.
Yeah.
Half of it I mudded and primed, and the other half I'm still letting it cure.
Yep. Let it dry.
These 8 or 9 years now. So
Exactly.
John would do it without the drywall. I mean, he'd just texture it
texture
without the drywall.
Spray it.
Yeah.
Texture it enough and it's done. Yep.
Yeah.
But
Lay
it's
it on
airtight,
thick.
so it's kind of an air sealing efficiency sort of thing.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
So yeah.
What were we actually going to talk about today?
No, we're doing it, man. Because I was talking about your shop update.
See?
And I wanted to talk about, because this is a time, I mean, all of us as woodworkers have the idea, I feel like, that we want to do Christmas gifts for people. And it usually comes down to one of those things where it's like, oh, I should have started this a long time ago.
Yeah.
But this week after Thanksgiving is kind of when the pressure goes up. It's showtime. It's the fourth quarter. It's the seventh inning. Whatever analogy you want. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about why, how we decide projects that we're going to make, and whether it's a one-off kind of a thing, or if you're going to do a batch of stuff because it's, has some. I mean, one-offs have advantages because you can customize it to a specific person, or a need for them that isn't going to apply to everybody necessarily. Batches are kind of nice because you can build in those efficiencies that, if you're buzzing boards through a planer, whether you're planing 3 boards or 8 boards, there's really not a huge time difference in there. So that's kind of what I wanted to talk about. That was all in there.
See, we're on topic.
We have a group of Cub Scouts coming through, right? Boy Scouts?
Cub Scouts, yep.
That'll be fun.
That will be kind of fun. It'll be kind of interesting because this weekend I'll be teaching a class for the Des Moines woodworkers on kind of some router basics or whatever. So have that class on Saturday. Monday night, have the Cub Scouts come in, and 2 totally different demographics, and I think it'll be kind of a blast. So I'm looking forward to it. We even have a little project that we're going to do for them or with them or whatever. So yeah. Lots of fun.
Get our hooks into the next generation of woodworkers.
That's right.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And their parents.
Yep. Well, it's like, I mean, parents have to fund the projects if they do it young, right?
Yep.
Like, that's I kind of, because I started heavily woodworking when I was in high school, and I didn't realize, my poor parents, I didn't make them, I asked them, they agreed to it. So they were cohorts in it. But one of my projects I built in high school was a roll top desk out of mahogany. Okay.
Whoa.
Yeah. It wasn't real mahogany. It was mahogany from Menards, which is worse because that stuff is expensive. And it's not even real mahogany. It's like that, like Luan or whatever it is. It's not, I mean, it's probably the mahogany family. But it's like, oh, yuck. But knowing how much my parents spent on that, it's like, ugh. Now I can't stand to like get rid of that desk, even though it's like, oh, I could do so much better.
That's a podcast in its own. Is like early projects. What do you do with those?
Ooh, yeah.
And how do you think about them? You know?
Yeah, that'd be a good one.
Mm-hmm. See, I've tried to get rid of those, and then my parents always like take them. It's like, oh, you can't get rid of that, and so it's in their house.
You made that,
like, kind of hidden away, and it's like, ugh.
So my parents are the ones trying to get rid of it.
Oh yeah,
yeah. They're like, hey, you want this desk, or we're gonna sell it at the garage sale? I'm like, what? Really? Yeah. It's like, you're supposed to be my parents, so you don't want to ever get rid of anything.
This is probably worth something.
Kids make. I know.
Ugh. All right, so recently I picked up a couple of woodworking books that I wanted to talk about because they're different but related, which is the best part of woodworking. The first one is one that I saw at a bookstore. It's called Simple Japanese Furniture. I was flipping through it at the bookstore, and then my wife ended up ordering it for me, which was pretty cool. And what I like about it is it's kind of a riff on a book that came out in Japan in 1953 about relatively simple woodworking projects. So this book isn't really a reprint on it. It just kind of pulls some of the best of projects from that book, and then talks about where this original book came from and shows some of the original pages, which is really cool. I'll put a link to it on the show notes page for this week's episode. But they use a lot of really simple kind of home center materials, and because it was in Japan originally, there's a totally different aesthetic that's going on and different types of needs for the different projects, and I just thought it was really cool to... There were a few in here that I really liked. There's a coffee table and a little magazine or book rack that I thought had some potential. I think Dylan is actually going to use one of the stool projects in this book as a basis for an upcoming woodsmith project. So anyway, I just, like I said, it was just a interesting take on a get started in woodworking kind of book, and made me think of some of the other ones that are out there, like Vic Tesselin. We've had him on the show. He's done some books, or Asa Christiana, who's formerly at Fine Woodworking and now does some freelance stuff, and I think even has a Pop Wood article coming up.
Yep.
He's got some books, 2 books in the like Build Stuff Out of Wood series that helps people get started. And in both of those sets of books, Vic's and Asa's, and there are others, those are just the ones that I'm familiar with, is that projects are simple, but they're still good looking. Because there's a lot of get started in woodworking books that are just, they're tougher to stomach on the design. So the other book, kind of at the opposite end of the spectrum, is one that I've kind of wanted to get for a while. It's about Hans Wegner, called Just One Good Chair, which was kind of a excerpt from a quote that he had, that his goal in life was to just be able to create one good chair, which, if you're familiar with Hans Wegner's work, he made
a lot of good chairs.
Yeah, he's probably had almost 100 just one good chairs. So it's a little story of his development it's not really a biography. I don't know, it's maybe like a biography or a timeline of his development as a designer. And he's got a bunch of other stuff too that he designed, not just chairs. Those are probably his most famous ones. But so it's really cool to learn about his process, because he isn't just a designer. He was regarded as one of the best craftspersons at the time too, that he had the skills to be able to make everything that he designed and make it at a high level. So that's kind of cool for me. So it's fun to see. I have an affinity for the mid-century design or Danish modern kind of look to it. Some of it can be a little cartoony, but there are some pieces that just have a real nice, clean styling that appeals to me.
Yeah. And I think that's one thing that has helped, it's helped, but it's also hurt the mid-century aesthetic, is the IKEA thing. Because IKEA is very mid-century Danish modern. And,
right.
You have to admit, the appeal of the design is just very, very good. It has a very broad appeal. But I think it's also hurt the mid-century or Danish modern style, because a lot of people look at it and be like, oh, it looks like an IKEA piece. It's like, well, no, an IKEA piece looks like this. Yes. It's like, it's, so I don't know. I also enjoy that. I don't care for mid-century. I would say I enjoy, Danish modern a little bit more, because it's very simplistic, very basic, very much kind of Shaker-esque.
Right.
So I enjoy that side of it.
And I think that's one of the things that I like about this book, is that it kind of goes into the detail that a lot of the Danish designer craftsmen of the 40s and 50s were inspired by and modeled a lot of their furniture off of Shaker pieces,
right,
or Windsor chairs or staked chairs or whatever that you want to call that. They have a root that you can still see in the well-designed pieces, because they took their time with it, that you can definitely see the family resemblance without it getting kind of goofy. So anyway, those are two book recommendations that I have. The Just One Good Chair is a little pricier of a book, but it's a much larger format, and it's just... And I think part of the reason that I like them is I don't know that I would build every project in there, but there's a lot of fun ideas to think about incorporating in other projects, or you can be able to see different approaches to common furniture styles where you could adapt that to another project, whether it's going to look exactly like that or not. So
yeah, I think that's kind of the fun thing, is looking at these furniture books or woodworking magazines, is just finding details that you could use other places. There's not very many projects that you're gonna I want to build that exact thing, but just finding the details in something that gives you ideas for other things, or to add on to some of your own ideas and stuff like that. So
all right, any last words?
In the shop today, I was thinking about I saw a can of something, and it made me think, what, okay, generally speaking, what would you use to thicken a liquid? A thickener, right? So why do we call it paint thinner or lacquer thinner? It should be thinner or thick. It's like thickener, or I don't know. That was just stuck in my head.
I can see that. Yeah.
Like we don't call it paint thicker, we call it thickener. So, but it's paint thinner.
Thinner.
I don't know.
Maybe it was paint thinner, and we've just shortened it. Like
you just start saying it fast. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know. That was just really stuck in my head when I was working in the shop earlier.
Okay.
So deep thought for the day.
My parting thought is, in this holiday season with Santa about, when a kid asks you about Santa, you tell them what you want and don't feel bad for them, because remember, there's still adults that believe in the Green Bay Packers.
See, my kids always ask me about Santa, and I said I don't believe in Santa, but that's why I get underwear for Christmas every year. So watch your P's and Q's.
True.
Yeah.
So,
but as I get older, nothing better than a good pair of underwear and a good pair of socks.
That's right.
Yep. All right. All right. So maybe next episode we will discuss and allow for people to put in their comments. What is on your woodworking wish list for this holiday season? So if you have any questions, comments, or smart remarks, I want to hear about them. You can send them in an email, woodsmith@woodsmith.com, or check out our YouTube channel where you can watch the three of us talk and laugh and hold up things to fuzzy web cameras. So you can check that out for the Woodsmith YouTube channel and leave any comments there as well. Don't forget to subscribe to see all of our other video content, including Chris Fitch's CNC Basecamp program. If you're interested in the idea of CNCs, Chris kind of goes through the basics of what it's like to use a CNC for different kinds of materials, projects, and ideas. So check that out. Otherwise, we'll see you again next week on the Shop Notes Podcast. Special thanks to Epilogue Laser. You can check out their products at epiloguelaser.com for customizing and creating all kinds of fun woodworking projects. See you next week, everybody. Bye.